Boker Tov. This daf today is 35a, and it's dedicated for a Shmira for the Chayalim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael, Hatzalah for the Shuyim. The best way to start here is to go back to what we covered yesterday a little bit. Go back to 34b in the middle of the page. Amar Rafuna says that even if the Shomer says, you know what, I'm not going to take an oath, I'll pay the money. Nevertheless, we don't let him do that. Mashpino so shvua she'ena bershuso. We still make him take an oath that the object he's watching is not in his possession because my time. Why? Chashinan shema einam nasamba. We're worried. Maybe he had the bright idea. I like this watch I'm supposed to be guarding. I'll just give you. I'll say I will. So I'll give you money, and that'll be that. So no, we don't let you do that. We make you take an oath. So Meisave. So after Rafuna taught this, they challenged Rafuna. A Malvis from a Mishnah in Shavuos. And the Mishnah in Shavuos is going to discuss 4 cases. Case number 1, a Malvis Chavero a Mashkon. Somebody lends his friend money on a Mashkon. A Mashkon is the equivalent of a deposit. He gives him a collateral. Reuven lends Shimon money, and Shimon gives Reuven the collateral. Va'avad a Mashkon. And now Reuven lost the Mashkon, lost the collateral. Ve'amar lo selel v'sicholav shekel haya shave. And the lender says to the borrower, listen, I lent you a sella. Excuse me. He says to the borrower, I lent you a sella, and what you gave me was a mashkon that was worth half a sella. So you still owe me. You still owe me another half sella. Vahala Amar, and the borrower says, no, kiala sella will be seen of sella yashava. He says, no, the mashkon was worth a sella. I don't owe you anything. Potter. In this case, he denies everything, so he doesn't have to take an oath. Case number 2. Stella v'sichol avelen v'sella shekel yashave. V'hala omer lo kil sella v'sani lav shlosha dinar ma yashave. The borrower says this case. He says my mashkon was worth 3 dinarim, meaning to say I only owe you 1 dinar. So he's mode of a mitzvah. It's a partial admission. So therefore, chayiv, an oath has to be taken. Case number 3. Stella hel v'sani lav beis yashave. In this case, the borrower says to the lender, you lent me a sella, but my mashkon was worth twice that. And the lender says back, no, I lent you a sella, and what you gave me was a mashkon with a sella, meaning the lender denies everything. Then he's exempt from an oath. And the 4th case is sella v'sani olav shnayim hayashave. The 4th case, he says, the borrower says to the lender, I borrowed a sella, and the mashkon was worth 2. The lender says the mashkon was worth 5, meaning say I owe you a few dinarim, but not as much as you say. So in this case, we say that he has to take an oath. And the Mishnah says, in all these cases, in case number 2 and 4, where an oath is taken, who takes the oath? Misha pikadon etzlo, the one who has the deposit with him, i.e., the lender. Shema yishavazeh, we're worried that the borrower would take the oath, and then the lender would take out the deposit and prove that the borrower is a liar. So therefore, in this case, we make the lender take the oath. Now, when the Mishnah says that in this case we make the lender take the oath, what's it referring to? Is it referring to case 2 or case 4? If it's referring to case 4, where the lender did a partial denial, partial admission, typically, anyway, we should know that the lender takes the oath there. Of course, the lender should take the oath because it's a partial admission. So why does the Mishnah even need to tell us that? Elam or Shmuel, so we're going to see several approaches to how we explain this Mishnah. First approach is Shmuel says Atza Reisha, refers to the first case. Maya Reisha, Aseifa the Reisha, means case number 2, where the lender says to the borrower, Sella v'sicholav shekel yashava, I lent you a sella, and the mashkon was worth half of that. V'hala omer lo kil sella v'sani olav shlosha dinarim yashava. And the borrower says, no, it was worth 3/4 of the loan. Then chayiv. Then in that case, typically speaking, the borrower would take the oath. The shvua gabilova there, since the borrower is partial admission, he's supposed to take the oath. The Amar Rabbanan, and the rabbis say l'shetava malva. The rabbis say when the lender makes the claim that we're worried shema yishava zaviyoti halas apikadon. And the rabbis are worried that if the lender makes the claim, the borrower is going to take out the oath, the borrower is going to make the oath, and then the lender will take out the deposit and prove that the depositor is a liar. So we don't want that situation. We don't want somebody to be exposed as a liar so flagrantly in the court. And so therefore, now the Gemara asks the question on Rav Huna's position. And if you're saying we anyway make him take an oath that it's not in his possession, then Isa with Rav Huna on top of 35a, if Rav Huna's position is correct, that we make somebody take an oath that it's not in his possession, why are we going to put the oath back on the lender? Because we're worried that the Mara will take the oath and then the lender will produce the object. Given the Mishtaba Malva Shenim Bershusa, once the lender has already said, I've taken an oath that is not in my possession, how can he produce it? So why are we pushing the oath from the borrower back to the lender? So Amar Rava, so Rava's explained it's not a proof against Rav Huna because she Edim Shenisrafa. In this case, the lender doesn't have to take the oath that it's not in his possession because there are witnesses that the object was burnt. Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if there are witnesses that it's not in his possession, then then we have a different problem. Why are we taking the oath away from the borrower and putting it on the lender? Where is he going to get it? He's not. Why do we have to be worried he's going to pull it out? He's not going to be able to produce it. It was burnt. So it says Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yosef, Yesh Edim Shenigneva. So no, they're not witnesses that it was destroyed, but they're witnesses it was stolen, so it still exists. But still, the Gemara says, well, still, how's the lender going to produce it? That we have to be worried about the borrower's oath. The Gemara says, another lender, if it was stolen, he'll track it down. He'll go to Scotland Yard and track it down. The Gemara says, well, if the lender takes an oath that to the value, still we have the concern that maybe the borrower will figure out where it was stolen and produce it. Maybe the borrower will go out there and produce it. The Gemara says, no, Bishlam and Malva, we're concerned that the lender could go find it because Yodea man ka'ayal v'nafik v'beisi. The lender knows who's coming into his house. V'azal v'tarach u'maisila. And he knows, he has his intelligence who's coming to his house and I'll go track him down. But Elalova, but the borrower, he doesn't have the same information. He doesn't know who's in the house of the lender, so he's not going to be able to track it down. So basically, Rava is explaining why it's not a question against Rav Huna, because in this case, it's not necessarily the case that the lender would take an oath, it's not his possession, because the item was either was stolen first. Abai says, no, what's the reason why we push the oath from the borrower to the lender here? Because we're concerned that maybe the lender, even though the lender would take an oath that it's not in his possession, we're concerned that maybe afterwards, after he makes his claim, the Yomer Lo Acher Shvua Mitzasiyah. He'll say, well, I took the oath, but after I took the oath, I found it in my possession, and I'm proving him as wrong as a liar. Rashi gives a different explanation. Zenishpa v'zenishpa. No, really, both of them are taking the oath, both the lender and the borrower. Zenishpa she'enim b'rshus. So first the lender takes an oath and it's not in his possession. Zenishpa kama yeshaveh. And the borrower takes an oath how much the value is worth. And the Gemara is, and this is what the Mishnah is saying. Minish batchilo, who takes the oath first? That the malva nish batchilo, that the lender takes the oath first. Shema yishavazev yotzi alas b'kodim, because we're concerned that if the borrower took the oath first, then the lender is going to just take out the deposit, and so therefore we make the lender first swear that it's not in his possession. Gemara tells us an incident. Rav Huna bar Taklifa mishmei de Rava. Well, first we have a different answer. Rav Huna bar Taklifa, in the name of Rava, says Reisha de Seifa to Yuftal Rav Huna. He says basically the Reisha of the Seifa, i.e. case number 3, where the borrower makes a claim against the lender and the lender completely denies it, that's actually a refutation to Rav Huna's principle. Again, what was Rav Huna's principle? That you always the shomer, that the guardian has to make a oath that it's not in his possession. So the first case of the Seifa is a refutation, where he says Sela will be sunny love, where the borrower says, I borrowed a Sela, and the collateral that I gave you was worth 2. Where the lender says no, where the lender says Mashkan was worth a Sela, Potter, he's exempt. The Misu the Rav Huna. And if we have the case of Rav Huna that the lender always has, that the guardian always has taken oath that's not in his possession, Migu de mishtaba malva she'enim bershuso ishtaba nami al gilgul shvua. Once the lender is already taking an oath on another matter that it's not in his possession, we could anyways force him to take an oath about the value because of the concept of called Gilgul Shvua. The concept of Gilgul Shvua is basically Gilgul to roll. Once you're taking an oath on one area, we can make you take an oath on a related matter. And so therefore, so therefore we could make him take that oath. So therefore, Rav Huna bar Taklifa is saying in the name of Rava that this is a contradiction to what Rav Huna said. So Rav Ashi, when I said this in front of Rav Kahana, Amrali, no, we're talking about a case here where the lender doesn't have to take the oath, it's not in his possession, because the borrower believed the lender when he said he doesn't have it. He didn't take an oath. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, so we're saying no. He believed him. So the Gemara says, so once he's taken the oath about once he doesn't have to take the oath how much it was in his possession, then the borrower should also believe him when the lender says how much it was worth. The Gemara says no. That we're not going to do. Because we say Lo kimway begave. He doesn't believe him about the value. He believes him that when he says he doesn't have it. Gemara says, well, why doesn't the lender believe the borrower? Why doesn't the lender believe the borrower how much it was worth? Gemara says, why doesn't he believe him? Isn't the borrower an expert in it? So the Gemara answers, no, the lender doesn't believe the borrower. The borrower believes the lender when he says it was in his, he doesn't have it, he doesn't believe him about the value, but he believes him when he says he doesn't have it. He doesn't believe him about the value because he says he's not an expert in it. And the lender doesn't believe the borrower, even though the borrower knows the value of the mashkon. The Gemara says, what's the difference that we say the borrower believes the lender, but the lender doesn't believe the borrower? So the Gemara explains, the borrower believes the lender because we have a verse from Mishlei that Tumas Yisharim Tancheim, that basically the perfection of the Yisharim will lead them. And he says, listen, this guy's a successful person, he must be having Hashem's merit shine over him. But Malva Mekayim Bebelova, the self-bogdim Yishadim. But the lender doesn't doesn't believe the borrower because he says self-bogdim Yishadim. Clearly he's not doing well, so it's a sign that he's missing something and therefore he doesn't believe him. Who Gavra? So now we have a case that there was a person, the Ifkid Kipe Gabe Chavre, that he deposited some jewelry with his friend. He says, Amarle Havli Kipe. He says, bring me back my money. Amarle Lo Yadana Echos Vinu. He says, I don't know where it is. Also coming to Rav Nachman, and came to Rav Nachman, Amarle Kolo Yadana Pshiusahi. He says, anytime a person says, I don't know where it is, I don't know something. Now you say, I don't know. Oh, but if you say, I don't know, that's your negligence. If you don't know where the object is, that's your negligence. And so therefore, he says, anytime where you say, I don't know, that's negligence. Zil Shalem. Go and pay him back for the jewelry. Lo Shilem. So he didn't pay. Also, Rav Nachman went and he seized his house. In the end, not only did they find the jewelry had gone up in value. It was now worth more than the house. So Amar Rav Nachman, Hadri Kipe Lamarayo, return the jewelry to the owner, Hadra Padna Lamare, and return the house to the watchman, meaning say, don't let the watchman keep the jewelry which had gone up in value in exchange for the house, but reverse it. Amar Rav Yasivna Kamed Rav Nachman, Upirkan Hamafkid Have. And so Rava says, I was once sitting with Rav Nachman, and we were studying Hamafkid. They were studying what we were studying. How geschmack is that? And we said to him, and under those circumstances, I asked Rav Nachman, Shilim Loratzo Shabbat. I said, but why? Didn't we say that it says in our Mishnah that if he pays and doesn't want to take an oath, he's entitled to the kefil, which means he's acquired it. Below otherly. And he didn't respond to my question. Because from the Mishnah, Namafkid, it implies that the person who's the watchman has acquired it. And here we're saying he hasn't. And he actually was correct, now that I think about it, that he didn't respond to me. My time ahasam. What's the reason? My time. And what's the reason in the case of the Mishnah, we say that the watchman has acquired it, but here he hasn't. There, he didn't drag him down to court. He said, I'll pay. I don't want to go to court. I don't want to take the oath. Here he forced him to go to court, so he hasn't acquired it. Mara says, Lamemer, the suburb of Nachman, the Shuma Hadar. So it means to say that Rav Nachman must be in the position that even though you evaluate something and you seize a property, then the person who the property was seized from can actually reclaim it. So isn't that the proof here? Mara says, no, Shani Asam the Shuma Batosu, the Kahave Kipa Meikar. No, that case was different. Never should have seized it because it was a mistaken seizure because the watchman had the jewelry with him the whole time. Amri Nardai, so the Nardai taught Shuma Hadar Tracer Yachishas that if you seize the property, you lose the property, you have 12 months to reclaim it. No, if your property was seized, you can always reclaim it. You can always reclaim the property. He says you're supposed to do the right thing. So if you lose a property at foreclosure, you can always go back and seize it. And always go back and reclaim it. Asita yashar vatov. You always have the right to do that. The Gemara says pshita. Well, it's obvious. Shamuel balchov v'aziu v'shamuel balchov today. It's obvious that if you're going to see something from a creditor, and the creditor went from a borrower, and the borrower went and it seized it from somebody who he was a creditor to. So pshita shamuel balchov v'aziu v'shamuel balchov today. He said, so the person number 3 can go and get it back from person number 1. He could say, listen, you're not better from the person who seized it from me. So I can always reclaim it from you too. But Zabna Ortav Yahava B'Matana. But let's say the guy sold it or it was bequeathed or he gave it as a gift. Then in that case, we don't allow the person to reclaim it because we say these people, when they got it, they didn't get it as money in exchange for a debt. They got it as property, and so therefore you can't really reclaim it from them. Shamula Isha in Siva. So let's say what happened was that the woman took the property and then she got married. Or maybe it was just the opposite. They collected from the woman as a debt, and then she got married. Umesa, and then she died. So then we say under those circumstances, the husband is considered to be like a purchaser, and so therefore will mahadar. And since he's a purchaser, you don't need to return it to him because the purchaser doesn't need to return it. He doesn't need to return the property that he bought because that's like he was bought it. That was like Zabna. And also will Madrin away, and we don't have to return it to him because he's a purchaser. The Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Be'usha Eskinu Aisha Shemacher B'Nochsei Aluk B'Chayabao Mesa Abal Motzim Yad Alukukos. Because in Usha they established that a woman who sold the Nichsei Maluk, she sold the property that she brought in, which her husband has the right to the fruit to, then the husband has the right to get it from the purchasers because he's considered a purchaser and he's considered to be first in line. On the top of 35b. Let's say the court did not evaluate it for the creditor, but rather the borrower himself gave the land. He says, listen, I owe you $1 million. Let me just give you my house. It wasn't done from the court. So one says that he has the right to reclaim it. One says he doesn't. The one who says he doesn't have the right to reclaim it, Sover hides the Bina Malio. He says, listen, it's a real sale. Because he sold it on his own. Hadra, the one who says he can reclaim it, Sover was the Bina Malio. It's not a real sale. And the reason why he collected it and he gave the money on his own was also a dina, and he actually didn't make the court force it, is machmas kisufa hudaves, because he was embarrassed to go to court, but he just short-circuited, we did a shortcut around the process, but it's the same effective thing as a seizure. And so now the Gemara asks the question: if the if the court gives a person property for his debt, when has he acquired it, so that he gets also the fruits of the property? Rabba says that Rabba says that basically when he gets the adrachta, which is 90 days after the case was ruled, that the court writes a seizure document on all that, basically on all the assets of the borrower, that wherever they are, he can find them and take them. So that's 90 days after the court gives its ruling. It writes in a draft. From that moment on, he's entitled to the fruits of the property. Abaye says, Abaye says no. Even though he didn't get the seizure document from the day the seizure document was signed, and Rava says Rava says even though that he got the adrachta in his hand and he didn't find the assets until later, when he finds them, he has to come to the court, and then the court makes a proclamation that there's real estate to sell, and so therefore that's the moment when they've completed those announcements, like they gave due notice to the public, you can buy this, so they can set a fair price. That's the moment where he's entitled to the fruits. Now to the next Mishnah. Let's say somebody rents a cow from his friend. Reuben rents. So let's say Reuben owns a cow, and Shimon rents it, and Shimon lends it after he rents it to Levi. And then the cow dies, so just dies natural cause. So the renter is exempt, but the borrower is liable. So Yishava Sochar Shemesa Kedarko. So then the renter could take an oath that it died in normal manner. And the borrower has to pay the renter. So the borrower pays the renter because he's responsible for death in this manner, whereas the renter is exempt. So Amar Rav Yossi, yeah, but the upshot is now we have the guy who's the renter, he's doing business with the other guy's cow. That doesn't work. Rav Yossi says you have to return the money to the original owner. The borrower gives the money back to the original owner, not to the renter. So Amar Ravi Bar Abin Abaye. So Ravi Bar Abin says to Abaye, Milti Socher b'may kani lai para. How has the renter acquired this cow? Bishvua. How does he acquire the cow? Only with an oath. So let the person who's renting it let Reuben say to Shimon, who's the renter, Dal an fidal shvosech. I don't want to take your oath. Therefore, I'm entitled to the cow. And I'll go deal with the borrower directly. So Abaye responds, Mi savris socher b'shvu dekakani. No, that's not how the renter acquires it, with an oath. Mishas miso dekani. He really acquires it only once the animal died. And the oath was only to appease the mindset of the owner. So now we have a very interesting upshot of this law. So Amar B'Zera Pa'amim Shabalam Mishalan Kama Peiros L'Socher. So remember, we said Reuben owned the cow. He rented it to Shimon, and Shimon lent it to Levi. But let's say Shimon doesn't lend it to Levi. After Shimon rents it from Reuben, he goes back and lends it back to Reuben. So sometimes the owners will end up having to pay several cows to the renter. How? Let's say Shimon rents it from Reuben for 100 days. And then Reuben borrows it back for 90 days. And then Hadar Agra Mine Timnin Yoman, and then Shimon will again rent it for another 80 days. It's the same cow, Hadar Shalim Mine Shimon Yomi. And then Reuben will borrow it back from Shimon for 7 days. Umeisa Betochim Shalasa. And now it dies within these time of which he borrowed. And he has to pay one cow. He has to pay back for each cow that he borrowed. And plus, we'll see, he has to pay back he has to still provide a cow to him for renting it. So he's going to end up having to pay basically 4 cows. We'll see. 2 for the borrowing and 2 for the renting. Well, since this is really only 1 cow, there's only 1 cow that went in and went out. Meaning to say it's the same cow. And so therefore you only have to pay him 1 cow. That's it. So actually, you should have to pay him 2 cows here. He says since there was 1 cow that went from the renting to the borrowing, and so basically there was 1 cow that went out from being rented and became borrowed, and then it went out from being borrowed and went out to being rented. And so therefore you should pay him 1 cow for both borrowings and 1 cow to do his work for the next 20 days. So Amoyomi, so a para beina denemoyachi. So Ravina says to Rav Achim Difta, what are you talking about? Do you think that the cow is here? That's what you're saying, that if the cow is here, you'd be completely exempt? No, he needs to give him. But now it's not here. He can only demand payment, and so since he has 2 payments, 2 claims he should pay twice. He has 2 cows. Chada de sheila v'chada de sliras. Shum sheila achasi v'shum sliras achasi. So Mar Ravashi says he really only has 2 cows, like Rav Achim Difta claim that the owner has to give to the renter 1 for the borrowing and 1 for the renting. And the reason is shum sheila achasi v'shum sliras achasi. That since there's 1 cow, but he borrowed it twice, so he's going to pay once for the borrowing, and also for the sliras, he only has to give once for the rental for 20 days. So basically, the cow that he borrowed, that he has to pay back, and also the rental cow he has to pay return to the owner. Okay, we'll stop here. Basically, one position is 4 cows he has to return, one position is 2 cows, and one position is Rav Yossi is 0 cows. Okay, so we'll stop here the recording. Shkoyach.